All right, Secretary Bessent, thanks for coming on again. Good to see you. I want to start in Iran and these protests that actually started largely with President Trump, yourself, and this administration, because right when you guys got in the door, you started this maximum pressure campaign to work to collapse Iran's economy. I would like to ask you to talk about that and also your reaction to what we're seeing tonight as Iran has evidently closed its own airspace. Go ahead, sir.
Rob, good to be with you. And look, what's going on in Iran is the culmination, or we're quickly approaching the end game of President Trump's plan that he put into effect almost immediately when he came into office. We've been applying a maximum pressure campaign on Iran's oil exports to cut off the sources of the regime's funding. And what we have seen in the past month is a total financial collapse of the regime. We're seeing banks go out of business. We are seeing inflation. We are seeing a lack of hard currency in the economy. Yeah. The Iranian leadership has been hurting the people. They have been spreading the money around the globe for proxy wars, to try to develop a nuclear weapon. And as we saw with Operation Midnight Hammer, June 22nd, when President Trump gave the order for our great B-2 pilots to end Iran's nuclear program, we continued the pressure then. And the Iranian people are now desperate because the economy has been so poorly managed, right, and the regime is on their back foot, and they have taken to violence. President Trump has ordered them to stop the violence or face the consequences.
Yeah, and the president indicated today, it was an interesting moment this afternoon, he indicated today that Iran has told him that the killing has stopped, which obviously Iran, all they usually do is lie. If it actually does stop, that'll mean that the uprising that we've seen over the last few weeks is going to just fully ignite. And I know those protests are continuing tonight throughout the night, and there's been millions of people protesting. You know, I don't believe that Trump actually believes what Iran says, but I also know that this could be they could be projecting something that's untrue. This administration likes to, maybe have a deception here. They did it in June when they bombed the nuclear sites. I guess the goal is to dismantle the regime. So I can't imagine that the president is now just going to back off and let the regime kind of recapture control of the country. That would be averse to what we're trying to do, right?
Well, Rob, President Trump's goal here is to stop the slaughter of the Iranian people.
Right.
And he wants to see them go back to the life they had. And he repeatedly, before Operation Midnight Hammer, he repeatedly offered the Iranian leaders a chance to come forward, say that they weren't going to have a nuclear weapon, and have a great economic relationship with the United States and the rest of the world. They've completely rejected that, and that's why we are where we are. We will see what happens here, but President Trump has put down a red line that this killing of innocent civilians, which is apparently in the thousands now, unarmed people being shot in hospitals, being
right,
shot on the streets, being shot with their children. This has got to stop, and President Trump is going to see to that.
Yeah.
And Rob, the other thing, as Treasury, who carries out the sanctions, we can see is we are now seeing the rats fleeing the ship, because we can see tens of millions of dollars being wired out of the country, snuck out of the country by the Iranian leadership. So they are abandoning ship, and we are seeing it come into banks and financial institutions all over the world. And what we do at Treasury is we follow the money, whether it is through the typical banking system or through digital assets. We are going to trace these assets, and they will not be able to keep them.
You'll freeze those, and yeah, they shouldn't. That regime is some of the worst people on the planet are the ones running the nation of Iran. It reminds me of Venezuela in a way. You're going to make a move here. You're going to say you have a chance, like you're doing with the vice president in Venezuela. You're going to let us kind of, control you in a way so that you run your country in a responsible manner that's fair to its people, or you're going to have a really big problem. It sounds like in Venezuela, you've got a partner that's capitulated. In Iran, you don't. So I guess I wonder, do you believe that the Iranian regime will still exist in a month?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the regime. What I want to talk about is President Trump's very strong demand that the killing of the Iranian people stops.
Yep.
And that's the United States' first goal, is to protect them. And if we look at the operation in Venezuela, we could just say this was the kind of thing the United States of America needed. This was a precision military operation, perhaps like no other. This is the mirror image of the embarrassment that was the pullout in Afghanistan under the Biden administration. If you were a foreign leader, especially in one of our adversaries, and you are looking at this operation, you have to think twice about causing any trouble on the globe. Whereas with Afghanistan, it's pretty clear that the ineptitude, that poor pullout there is what caused Putin to look at the U.S., think we're weak, and move into Ukraine. Everyone now understands that the U.S. is at its pinnacle of strength.
Yeah. Yeah. I so many questions about Iran. I'm just so curious. I know you're limited on what you can say, and I know, how critical that is, to keep whatever is going on there. You might have things that you can't say on that, but it's fascinating to see this moment. I know that Iranian Americans, there's a ton of them here in this country, are hoping that this is the end of that regime, and I know just how badly, I think this administration has wanted to see the end of the regime that has sponsored so much terrorism and has been such a horrific nation for the whole world for decades now. I want to move on. I want to get to tariffs. I want to also talk about Venezuela as well. 50 million barrels of oil being sold off, and that's happening, I believe, this week, right? Can you tell us what the latest is in Venezuela?
Yes, Rob. So much of it has already been sold off or is in the process of being sold off. That's being done by Energy Secretary Chris Wright, old hand in the energy industry. And, Rob, I just want to say, too, is only the cabinet that President Trump put together could have done all this. Was Secretary Rubio, the Energy Secretary Wright, and then we at Treasury are working on overseeing the finances, and that's all led by President Trump and his bold decision to go in. So what we are doing is we are accumulating assets for the Venezuelan people. We are putting it into an account. We quarantined the country's oil exports, and we are selling off the oil, going into an account for the benefit of the Venezuelan people. And the funds will likely start moving back into Venezuela as soon as tomorrow, and that will fund government operations. It will keep the security forces going, and it will get to the Venezuelan people to feed them and avoid a humanitarian crisis. What we are not doing here, Rob, is what happened in Iraq. We are not going in and the equivalent of debathifying. What we are doing is we are trying to work with the remaining regime members. They are being highly cooperative. Again, having seen what happened to President Maduro, President Trump has is guiding things forward. He's in constant contact with the former vice president, now the leader of Venezuela, and tomorrow he is going to be hosting the Nobel Prize winner in the Oval also to talk. Be talking to Machado to talk about Venezuela's future.
If I can just do 20 seconds, because I've blown the show out already with a long interview here, but Jerome Powell under criminal investigation, lying to Congress about the cost of the Federal Reserve renovations. Even a lot of people that support the president think this feels somewhat retaliatory. Tell us why it's not, the investigation into Chair Powell.
Well, a couple of things here, Rob. The Federal Reserve occupies a unique spot in the American governmental process. They have no supervision, they have no accountability, and I think that we will look at this and think that A couple of things on Chair Powell's watch. The Fed is now losing $100 billion a year, $100 billion, with no accountability.
Yeah.
We had the worst inflation in 49 years, and we'll see what the tally ends up being, but very good chance that we will have had ethics violations over the past 4 to 6 of the regional presidents or governors, and there needs to be some accountability.
So it's an investigation. We'll leave it at that. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Hey, thanks for coming on. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, Rob.
You know, everybody's reporting the same stories, the same spin. You turn the channel, it's always the same. But not us. We're different. We report the real news. No spin, just the facts. Turn to us, and you won't turn back.
Tune in to Rob Schmitt tonight on Newsmax.